My name is host Eric. I'm the host of Talking with Famous People. And Talking with Famous People is my YouTube channel, which has very much been central to my life for over a decade now. But today, the combination of this past week or whatever, so a little bit less than a week maybe, but perhaps marks the most dramatic sudden shift to me and the channel in general since my dad's suicide. Um, this weekend, and a little bit more than a weekend, really, has been has produced so much meaning avalanche that I barely began to process it. Naturally, there were a lot of vectors coming together concurrently from a lot of different directions. There's a lot of intensity driving the thing because of the fact that there was a lot of emotion involved. I mean, most significantly of it, having to do with dealing with an individual who's been the victim of a serial abuser for years. Like I know when I was getting out of a relationship with a BPD person, my emotions were all out of whack. While I was with her, toward the end of the time I was with her, I started acting like a BPD person. For just time after I got out of it, I was kind of damn like a BPD person. It's very emotionally just like violent. It's very emotionally violent. I don't like to use violent in a metaphorical way, but with all those intense realities happening within people here to some extent regarding that issue, plus the additional emotional intensity of Corey and I, who really love each other and both really want to be good friends, finally bypassed this blockage between us. And it's not like we've resolved everything yet, because most of the issues between us, I realize now, are symptoms of the wickedness he's been subjected to. And that actually had nothing to do with me at all. So it took me a long time to I should have realized this before he even got here, but I didn't realize it until after he left. But perhaps the single best revelation I just had not very long ago from the weekend so far is that it finally makes sense now to me in full why I'm correct. Because, like everybody else, I was very troubled by the statistical unlikelihood of this. How can it possibly be that me out of 7 billion people is so special that I can figure it out and nobody else can, right? I realized something today. And I realized it because Corey came here and for some reason surprised me by proving that he's just the same as everybody else in the world. Without cognitive functions, he makes the same kind of wrong arguments and is befuddled because it's not possible to be correct in general at all without cognitive functions. So what I realized today is I've been assuming that this must be a combination of two things. Me being unusually smart and a bunch of particular things. What I realized today is, first of all, as I keep telling everybody and I agree with everybody on this, I am not that smart. And this is one of the things that has troubled me for a long time. How could it be that I figured this out when I'm not that smart? I mean, I'm smart, but there are plenty of people in the world who are smarter than me. Today I realized it has nothing to do with me being smart. Anybody who is just smart, they don't have to be very smart or a genius or anything, just a good thinker, right? With the exact same random sets of particulars that I had they been dropped at that moment at the exact right spot at the exact right time in history, they would have figured it out themselves just as easily, probably more easily than I figured it out. It took me forever to figure it out. Now that makes sense, right? It's because I was giving credit to something other than cognitive functions for my superior understanding. The only reason I understand things better than everybody else is because this is what's going on. We're all shooting a free throw shooting contest. I acknowledge up front that I'm not a very good free throw shooter. And I acknowledge that all the players around me are like NBA free throw shooting pros. And I can't tell a lie and say, look guys, I'm sorry, I'm beating all of these pros at shooting free throws somehow. I don't get it either. Well, it's easy to get when you realize that all of the pros are in this free throw shooting contest with a beach ball. They don't know it's supposed to be done with a basketball. They don't know what making a free throw is supposed to look like. And since I'm the only one with basketball, it's true that I'm winning the free throw shooting contest, but everybody else thinks I'm losing it. And the only way they can be correct about that is if they have the piece of information that I have. Namely, oh, you're supposed to use a basketball, not a beach ball, right? So things really make a lot more sense to me now. I get no credit for anything at all. And that makes my life so much easier. Because I have had to begrudgingly acknowledge that, I mean, I'm not saying I'm the smartest, I'm the most correct, right? But I had to acknowledge that it had to do, I am very smart, I guess, because otherwise how could I be the most correct? Well, the answer is right in front of my face. Nobody can be correct at all until they understand cognitive functions. And once somebody does understand it, you don't have to be particularly smart to understand things just as well as I do. And I can't blame myself for the fact that I happened to bounce out of the back of a truck and land on this thing at the right moment, in the right spot, in the right time. I can't blame myself for that. I didn't try to do that. You can't deny the plausibility of my story because some random shit happened to me. But the sad thing I came to understand is even though if people understood it and applied it to the paradigm, it would solve almost every instance of people hurting each other. I'm never going to successfully explain it. First of all, people hate explanations. They're not looking to be right. They're looking to have their beliefs affirmed. Explanations are not useful for that. They're only useful for being right. Nobody wants to be right. They want to have their beliefs affirmed. So obviously, explaining things is not going to help. I've been sort of not realizing the central question that's critically important until this past weekend. Why isn't this working? I keep explaining this incredibly powerful truth correctly, and I am not making any progress. I, I was so locked into my cognitive function frame. I just thought, well, but I mean, that's what explanations do. Correct explanations correctly explain things, so they get adopted because they're better than incorrect explanations. Usually, unless it's about you. Nobody wants me to be able to explain them because then they perceive that as Eric thinks he knows me better than I know myself. I do. But absolutely nobody wants to hear that. And almost every instance you can imagine when somebody's saying that, it's completely bullshit and a easily affirmed broad heuristic you can reject what that person said, right? So, maybe this realizing in full why, if I come to realize in full why I cannot ever make any progress with explanations. And I don't understand it in full yet, but I understand the gist of it, right? Then, after I understand it in full, perhaps I can figure out a way out of it. Earlier today I was saying there is no way out of this. There's no way I'm ever going to be able to figure out how to emerge from this clusterfuck of catch-22s I find myself in. It's like endless succession of catch-22s and not a single cop-22. Well, the answer is possibly something like to successfully explain it, you have to pretend you're not explaining it by writing a novel of some sort that allows individuals who read it to believe themselves to have accomplished something by understanding a meaning that wasn't explicit. Like that. That might work a little bit with some people, right? The issue is people have their egos so heavily attached to everything. Sure, I've got my ego attached to some things too, you know? But that has never, ever, that I can recall, caused me to be wrong. In other words, whatever my ego issues are, I seem to be incapable of being dishonest with myself about it for very long. A very disinterested type. I assume, just because of my stack, that subjectivities are not to be trusted. And so, when I feel like my ego's been bruised, I go, oh, fuck, he schooled me. That stings so bad. Oh my God. I just got fucking schooled. It hurts, right? It hasn't happened in years, but it has happened before. And it's one of the worst feelings in the world. But what feeling I don't have is denial of what just happened. So, so of course, it's natural for me to project a frame of reference that says, well, if I explain it correctly and there's no progress, it's because I've explained it correctly, but not communicated well enough. In other words, I need to come up with an explanation with fewer words, simpler words, and then they'll understand it. No, that's what I've come to understand. I need to not explain it to people because as soon as I start explaining things, people say, you horrible man. You think you're special. You think you know better than me. And therefore, you are always wrong about everything. Hey, Jeff Shaw. So, okay. I just need to accept reality as it is and behave accordingly. I don't need to try to pretend like I'm not informed by things I now know. So now that I get this whole thing, better than I did before, anyway. I'm not saying I get it in full yet, but hopefully I won't be so frustrated. Like, poor Corey. it, it was an unavoidable conflict because he wasn't thinking of things in terms of my experience, and I wasn't thinking of things in terms of his. So it was like, I guess there was some sort of feeling of betrayal when Corey came up, and I discovered, what are you, imitating idiots who stop on my YouTube channel? He didn't expect that to frustrate me. He's not imitating idiots. He's subject to the same fundamental handicap that everybody who doesn't understand cognitive functions is. He's trying to shoot free throws with a beach ball. And no matter how brilliant or intuitive you are, and Corey's pretty special, but it doesn't matter. You could be Albert Einstein. In fact, Albert Einstein did this. He lived his entire life as a super genius and never figured this out. So it's obviously has nothing to do with intelligence. And now, because I can be honest and say, it's not because I'm smart, well, it's immensely liberating. Because of course I have to tell the truth, the implications of what I was saying before, because I was assuming something I should have been assuming, but I don't blame myself for that. This whole process is opening up new areas of the map, and that's part of the process. I'm gonna mistakes like that. When you realize it's a mistake, the fact that I made a mistake like that meant there was a an uncovered area of map that needed to be uncovered before I could understand that that was a mistake. that's like extra informative because why did I make that mistake is like the best question ever. When you have the answer, right? When you have the answer to why did I make that mistake, it almost never just resolves that mistake. Because why you made the mistake is a symptom of some epistemological failing, right? And why did I make that mistake allows you to identify the epistemological failing, fix that, and then you're not at risk of any more mistakes in that whole area. So that's pretty fantastic. That's just beautiful and fantastic. And now I can sleep soundly at night. Because I too have been continually troubled by this. Like, look, Eric, you have every reason in the world to trust yourself on your conclusions here because you have done all of the work so many times, so correctly, done the process so well. You understand what you're doing so well, and there's zero possibility that you have incorrectly interpreted the strength of this case. And because I had that one false assumption that somehow that reality inferred that I was unusually smart, well, it's troubling because despite what people think about me, everybody thinks I need to be taken out a notch. They don't listen to my words. I continually tell people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'm not as myriad people smarter than me. The problem is that created a bit of dissonance, right? Because, well, then if there are many people smarter than me, then why didn't they figure it out? Now I get it. Because they didn't get bounced out the back of the truck to happen to land on that particular stack of pillows at just the right moment for no particular reason. That's the truth. And blessedly, it doesn't give me any credit. Because that's what people hate. And I was really double bound because my previous understanding, which was exactly the same as my current understanding, except for this one error of assumption, I had no choice but to continually visit the battle again of the fact that I had to admit my claims were true. Like, yeah, I am exclusively right about it. I don't want to admit that. I don't want to admit that I had anything to do with this truth. Because Eric makes truth into poison for other people. Now, I don't have to spend so much time trying to figure out a way that I can bake a cake without poison in it. Because, either way, in the previous test group, my kids had to have poison in them. They either had stuff that you were allergic to, truth that made me look good, or cake that poison to me in it. Namely, I had to lie. I wasn't going to do that, so I kept saying, look, it's really great cake. Well, it might be, but you made it, Eric, so it's definitely horrible. Now he's like, I didn't make shit, man. I did a slow, horrible job of figuring out Hume's thing. And I was incredibly lucky that nobody else who was even a little bit smart was paying attention to this. Because if anybody else who was even a little bit smart was paying attention to it, they would have figured it out way sooner than me. Because, I mean, if you want proof that I'm not that smart, why did it take me like 7 years to figure it out? All I was doing was like proofreading Jung's work and fixing his grammatical errors and stuff. Why should that take me 7 years until I'm actually right about it? 6 years of saying some right things and mostly wrong things about it until I finally get it down so I'm right about it. If I'm so smart, I should not have taken me anywhere close to 7 years. So, now that we can all agree that I'm just some random lucky idiot, maybe the truth can do its job. Isn't that wonderful? I can't have me, I tell you. From my perspective, my cognitive function bias, it seems a threat to civilization. Like, you can't cure cancer unless you admit that you had nothing to do with curing cancer. Okay, now I can do that. Now that I've had that one realization, I'm not faced between a choice between telling you the truth as I understood it, although it was wrong, or and making you thereby completely unwilling to even consider tasting the truth, or lie. I'm no longer faced with that choice. Now I can happily just tell you, well, let's just, for the sake of argumentation, acknowledge that I'm mostly an idiot. I'm not unusually smart. At best, I'm slightly smarter than average. Let's just acknowledge that, okay? Now I can just acknowledge that because it's not relevant. So I don't have to have a position on it. This is the beautiful thing about the long, hard way of doing things. The meticulous, proper way of doing things is wherever the clog is, it may trouble you for a long time, but you know that once you find that clog, unclog it, that whole area will now be working perfectly because you meticulously cleaned and made sure all of the connecting parts are perfect, even though the water's not flowing here yet. And that's the reward of doing things properly. Yes, it's laborious. Yes, it strains the capacity of both my intuition and logic. But at least it's reliable. So I just don't make statements about things that I'm not certain about, having already done all the argumentation myself. Right? Sometimes I'll make those claims, and despite the fact that I've done everything as perfectly as it can be done, I will still be wrong because I'm not that smart. So I'm dumb enough to assume for no particular reason that smartness must be a component in this equation. If I had been smart, I would have realized there's no reason to presume that. Why are you presuming that? You yourself keep realizing, oh, I didn't actually get smart until I figured out cognitive functions. Now I realize cognitive function understanding makes you smart. Nobody's smart until they understand cognitive functions. Everybody's an idiot. Kant, again, um, Albert Einstein, Tesla, they were all retards. For the same reason everybody else is, same reason I was, because they didn't understand cognitive functions, so they were trying to do things in the wrong frame. Now, granted, if you are Einstein or Tesla, you're working in a field that has done everything in its power to isolate its processes from human attention. That's what science and math is an attempt to evaluate things without impacting them by human attention. So, for Einstein and Tesla, even though they didn't have the right frame, they didn't display as idiots because they never talked about things that required the right frame. Had you asked them questions, the correct answer of which required them to understand cognitive functions, they would have been wrong in all of their answers. It doesn't matter if they were the smartest person in history. Because smartness has nothing to do with it. I couldn't be smart either until I understood cognitive functions. Pretty powerful, right? Pretty revolutionary because unfortunately, it's more important to people that Eric be taken down a notch than it is to resolve all of the conflict in human history. Of course it's going to be. Because they have no possible conception of how any such thing could exist. It hasn't heretofore. And no good reason to think that they should listen to me because I'm making a claim that any sane person should dismiss out of hand. That I, one random guy, was somehow able to figure out what nobody else could figure out for all of human history. I'm just the unlucky bastard who got the winning lottery ticket in a town with no lottery redemption machines. So, anyway, just a few of the slabtacular revolutionary slabulations that have happened of late here last week or so. And it's like, I kept saying to Corey things like, Corey kept saying to me things like, basically, you intellectualize wrong. If I could trust you as an intellectual, you'd have a bunch of intellectual authors that you respect that you could tell me about. That was very helpful because it helped me to clarify and articulate the distinctions between our attentional matters, right? he's an observer knower type, right? Who interfaces. So naturally, he's going to survey a bunch of stuff and then holistically know about really the author. This guy is really talking, knows what he's talking about. That guy really is great. This guy, My process is negationary. So when when I'm asked to engage intellectually with something, that's my process. So when Corey said the Supreme Court has too much power, I did what I always do. I evaluated it for legitimacy and called it bullshit. Because, of course, everything's bullshit until it's substantiated by the person making the claim. Naturally, I asked Corey some questions to find out why the Supreme Court has too much power. And I then discovered he doesn't have reasons why he believes that. He has his intuitive conclusions that he's drawn based not on specific arguments people have made, but on his general impression of the book, general impression of what their message means and stuff. And I was getting mad, being like, you're just saying, Corey, that your way of knowing and deciding things is always the right way. And because mine differs, there's something wrong with me. I was correct. That's what he was saying. But what I should have, if I had been a little bit more ahead of the game, I should have said something like, I just ask questions like, so do you think it's better to know than to determine things? But see, it wouldn't matter what questions they asked, because he kept coming back to Eric, right? For perfectly understandable reasons to some extent. Because, he and I, he even more than me, just said, basically treated the words correct and smart as exactly the same thing. He told me multiple times this weekend, Eric, you think you're smarter than everybody else. I mean, I knew it was false. I told him that plenty of times, and I've told everybody that plenty of times. No, I do not think that. But at the same time, I knew the next question to ask is then, well, why did you figure it out? And I knew that answer wasn't satisfactory to people. It's a combination of me being smarter than normal and a bunch of particular things, blah, blah, blah. Right? Now that I understand that the only reason I'm more correct than everybody else is because I, unlike everybody else, got a little bit obsessed with this thing and had the skills of a debate coach. It's understandable. Genuinely smart people wouldn't have come near it because there were too many heuristic indications that it's obviously bullshit. If you looked into personality type, MBTI stuff, looked at a few YouTube videos, you would quickly realize that everybody's saying different things and dismiss it as obviously bullshit. So, in fact, it was important that I be kind of dumb because only somebody who wasn't very smart would have done that. Of course, like this video here, just as every one of my videos, will still trigger people, because unless it's 95% self-deprecation, 5% truth, I mean, I get it. I don't like smug people either, right? Certainly I don't like eye rolly people who are like, oh God, how dumb are you bad? I don't like that at all, right? But reality had forced me to get increasingly more like that, it seems like, because I just kept explaining things correctly over and over again and kept getting the same variety, a relatively robust set, but not definitely finite, not that big set of rungs that, after you've been doing it for 10 years, you've heard this playlist over and over and over and over again forever. So my problem was I was expecting people to listen to what I was saying and understand based on what the words meant. I already had it available in front of me. As long as I needed to know that wasn't going to work. The vast majority of people are not equipped to deal with words properly. I mean, to deal with words rigorously, okay? However you're dealing with words is proper for you. It's fine. But, I mean, not government work, right? There aren't that many people who are good enough at the specialty that's required to do anything but government work. If you're doing government work, government work is always, designed to be doable by morons, nitwits, and halfwits. So, obviously, if you're doing government work, fine. If she was chosen for doing government work, fine. If, Joyce Mang were doing government work, fine. But typology is actual work. It's real work and it's important work. And so the ability to do that kind of work for 99% of the population, maybe even more, is only at the government work level. That's fine if you're working at the DMV, but this is actually something important and hard. So, it just shows you how powerful frame biases are. Even though I was very much at the very front of the line with a gap between the next people behind me in my understanding of cognitive functions, I'm still subject to the cognitive functions like everybody else, and my frame bias had me working under the assumption that people listened to what I said and either didn't understand it and therefore didn't learn anything, or did understand it and then learned something. my, again, faulty assumption. People don't listen to my words. Now, maybe this is maximally exemplified in Corey at the moment, but that's a temporary state of being, right? But seeing his maximal display of not listening to what I'm saying, not responding to what I'm saying, and instead just continually addressing irrelevancies like, I mean, you seem really angry, Eric, about this. That's probably indicative of something wrong here. Yes, Corey, you successfully made me angry because, like every other idiot on the internet, you come in here to tell me I'm wrong about something that I've been applying my specialty at figuring out for 10 years, telling me I'm wrong about it, even though this is me making the claim, not anybody else. Everybody else, they make claims boldly, go ahead and assume they can be very likely to be wrong. I don't even make mild claims until I'm as close to certain as possible that not just that I can substantiate them, but that I have the answers to all of the rebuttals to all of my substantiations, all the possible rebuttals. So, if you know anything about my relationship with claims, you know that my absolute fucking worst nightmare is being caught with my pants down. Make a claim, think I have done the work, have all the substantiations I need and all the rebuttals to their rebuttals that I need, and discover that somehow I failed to anticipate a critical argument and had no response to it. That's my absolute worst fucking nightmare. And here I am making a big, bold claim. The thing is, if anybody else making a big, bold claim, fine. I assume it's bullshit. But if you know anything about me, you know I'd rather die than make a big, bold claim unprepared to win the argument. But I get it. It's like you can't expect people to decide you're right because they trust the rigor with which you think. That's not a good reason to trust anybody. Not a good reason to agree with anybody. Let's put it that way. But the problem I have is that there are myriad good reasons to agree with me, but those aren't ways that other people understand things. So, my explanation, no matter how perfect, no matter how elegantly stated, no matter how precisely stated, no matter how concisely stated, isn't going to work. I thought your worst nightmare is ending up at a disco party choreographed by Club ESFP. Actually, that kind of sounds like a dream. If I can avoid talking to the guy, I'd be interested in participating in that, actually. If he's got the choreography for me and he wants me to dance in some video or something, and I don't have to talk to him, That would be fun. It'd be like watching Huell Hauser visiting the Baghdad Cafe. If you haven't seen it, you are doing yourself a terrible disservice. I cannot find, I cannot no, but I don't want to say things three ways because remember, explaining things is the way I want to do things, and it's not going to work. I'll probably end up just still explaining things because that's who I am, you know. But at least now, people will not be able to use my refusal to lie against me and force the argument into irrelevant ground of whether I'm too full of myself and stuff, right? I'll have a good response for that now. And it won't be a lie. That's progress. And what we see here in Alcoholics Anonymous is progress, not perfection. Perfection is just for Jesus. Well, right there, Alec T, you proved you did listen to me because you did something almost nobody does. You responded to what I said, not what you intuited about my emotions, not that's how I determine whether somebody's listening to me. Do they respond to what I said, or do they respond in a way that suggests they didn't listen to what I said? You listened to what I said because you responded to it directly. You were on point. It addressed something I said. And even more impressively, Alec T, it addressed something relevant I said, amazingly. So my two biggest problems is I'll say something true because somebody asked for whatever and point out that it's true but irrelevant, and nobody cares about its relevance, right? So, okay, well, it is true that I'm the guy who figured it out first or whatever. That's enough right there to end any further listening to Eric. Even though it's completely irrelevant to whether I'm correct. So, those are two different ways of non-responsiveness. You can either have literally not listened to anything I said and instead respond to how you interpreted my tone or something, or you can respond directly to what I said, but ignore the fact that what I said isn't relevant to the point. I answered your question honestly because that's what I do. I also correctly told you it's not relevant, and then you just ignore that part. So those are two ways of non-responsiveness that bug me and I encounter all the time. You know, people making statements about my motivations, emotions, or other irrelevancies, or people thinking they can communicate with me successfully by treating what I say as the same thing as their impressions about my feelings, let's say. They're not the same thing at all. Well, what you were saying there basically was that you're feeling mad about this. I said none of those words. That is not basically what I was saying. Had you listened to me, you would have heard me say specifically, my emotions are irrelevant. And you would have responded to that, even if you were at least this would even at least be somewhat responsive. No, you're not. That would be somewhat responsive, totally unsubstantiated, but at least it will respond to what I say. I am stunned by the frequency of time that people can't even do that or won't even do that, whichever, it doesn't matter, you know. They insist on making their response about something other than something I said. Or about something I said that's irrelevant that I clearly stated was irrelevant. But you know, people aren't that into relevancy anymore. Recently, I watched another weird episode of few hours ago. I've never seen before called the Bunny Museum. Oh my god. The woman who operates with her husband the Bunny Museum, she and her husband absolutely 100% both must be in bipolar. And the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen is like, how could you possibly have so little intuition that you think that cramming your family home you share with your husband, floor to ceiling, wall to wall, with various pictures, mugs, stuffed animals, plates, everything with bunnies on it, and then open your house as a bunny museum, appointment only, and then invite people who make the appointment, give them a tour of your ridiculous bunny fetish and your inability to recognize that some objects you shouldn't keep. You're just proud as punch, you know, like, oh yes, we've got uh, more different kinds of bunny paper plates, all the way from here to here. This is the house she lives in. And it's crammed in every possible direction with bunny nonsense that she thinks justifies her opening a museum. And then she's very fussy about anybody touching anything. Evil house like, well, look at this. It's another bunny. And she's like, you please tell the people when they come, do not act like you. I mean, not touch these things. It's like some fucking like dumb rabbit they got at CBS at Easter. You know? What in the world are these people doing? I know all devote my whole life to the one idea I had one time. Bunnies. Whatever has bunny on it. Look, this here is a ruler. It's got pictures of bunnies on it. It's part of our museum collection. From lady who lives in Pasadena. I mean, I'm not trying to invalidate their lives. They seem to be really like it, you know? I just can't help but think, wow, antipolar can really be a horrible disease. Oh, how those poor people have so little intuition that they think making their house into a bunny crap storage locker and calling it a museum and living in it, squeezed in between these piles of dumbass bunny shit. I, how has humanity made it to here? How is it possible we got electricity and all this other stuff? I do not know. If you also watch the Baghdad Cafe episode, you will agree. You'll say, "How is human civilization still alive? How are human beings alive at all?" Like, wait, this species of cretins came up with all this shit? It's no way. That guy behind the counter at the Baghdad Cafe who was on the phone. That guy is such a character. Just it's almost impossible to believe that Baghdad Cafe thing was not scripted, not a scripted farcical send up like some smart new meta media or something. It's almost impossible to believe it. It's like it's like I had this one video where I ran into a fire, right? And this lady crosses in front of me, and then this thing explodes, and this fire blows up more, and the firemen go running away, and all this shit happens in very rapid succession, like 10 or 12 dramatic events in a minute, you know, that you normally couldn't get one of those in a video if you were lucky, right? The Baghdad Cafe is like that, except instead of exciting events, it's impossibly boring outcomes for you, Hauser. It's like, let's write a script where Hugh Hauser goes and does the whole thing, except he's accidentally wandered in this ship of tards, and everyone gives him the worst possible answer you can think of. Like, he's trying so hard to make this episode go off. And he doesn't have any help from anybody because everybody there is either so disinterested in Huel, so strangely, like, I guess either, like, I don't know if he was dumb or if he was, I don't know what was up with this guy. He was asking questions. So, you get a lot of tourists from LA? Oh, yeah, LA, San Diego, mostly France. It's like, somebody had to have scripted that line. Clearly, it's Baghdad Cafe maybe has seen one European tourist in his entire existence. At the moment he goes in there, it's got a couple of desert rats, a truck driver, and a couple of people who are passing through from New York or something, you know. And meanwhile, this guy is trying to give Huel what he thinks Huel wants, which is flashy answers. But even an epipolar person, epipolar somehow and an bipolar would immediately be able to tell this guy is just flat out lying. Yeah, the first guy he will go talk to inside the place. Oh, but I haven't met you. Who are you? He's like, General whatever. General? Were you a general in the war? I'm still active duty. He's like 86 years old. And obviously hasn't been active duty in at least 50, if he ever was. And Hugo goes, oh, and then Hugo kind of tries to go away from that guy. And then the guy's like, pushes his book over you. Look, this man 85, this man 82. He was just like, oh, wow. It's so ridiculous. It's so magically beautiful that everything went wrong. Every single thing went wrong. And it wasn't scripted at all. Would you look at that? And a dog ate an avocado? Well, Huel, you crazy guy, you were great. As Corey said, thank you at Jeff Shaw. It would seem, it's apparently just not my moment to be listened to, what I was hoping to, only because the moment does not have room for me in the place where I wanted it to be. Is that what you're talking about? Are you talking about me not listening to you? It's not that I don't want to listen to you. It's that I don't have my glasses on. Oh, I do have my glasses here, actually. Now I can read the chat. I had to struggle to read the chat without my glasses on. Shop of Charge was floated as a title. It should have been. Well, that's fine. If you say I'm not interested in reading the chat right now, that's not a response. That's an assertion, right? You're making an affirmation of some sort, and then I'll either agree with it or I'll ask you questions to find out if I should agree with it or whatever. You're not responding in that instance. You're making an affirmation. I may not get around to reading it, but it's not because I'm being non-responsive. It's because I didn't read it or didn't think it was deserving of a response mostly because it's just like, if somebody asks a question wrong enough, They don't want to get an explanation about how they asked the wrong question. They want answered, and I don't want to deal with that. So I mean, I don't always respond to everything everybody says, but that doesn't make that's not relevant as to whether I'm responsive or not. I get Alec T that did somebody time him out or something? Because if Rachel says get lost, I didn't even say get lost, Rachel. You're a moderator. Just freaking do what you feel like. Because yeah, Shaw can say shitty things about me, but as soon as he's annoying you, then he's crossed the line. You know? It's like, yes, you are allowed to attack me, but if you do it in a way that annoys Rachel, then you're gone. You annoyed her the other night because you got frustrated at your inability to attack me and get the responses you wanted, so you started attacking her directly. As a consequence, she's not as tolerant of you attacking me as she normally would be. And she's not like she's tolerant of it, she just elects not to say anything because she knows I can handle myself just fine. She doesn't need to defend me. And she'd prefer, even though she doesn't like what Jeff Shaw's saying, not to get involved in a tit for tat or something. So if she says something, well, you're still on her shit list, therefore you're still on my shit list. Because when it comes to Rachel, I promise to always be entirely subjective and unfair, as I should be. Right. Yeah, I get what you're saying, Alec, but my key core warning of my point is when you make an assertion, that's a different thing than when you make a response. And I'm not complaining about how people make assertions. I'm complaining about how people position themselves as responding to me when they're not. No timeout, Alec T. Alec T's wonderful. Don't time him out. He hasn't made Rachel mad. Rachel, are you mad at Alec T? If Rachel says, yes, I'm mad at Alec T, then we'll go ahead right away and time him out. No, because look, this is a response. Well, okay. In your instance, now that I look back, this paragraph is actually a continuation of the previous paragraph. So, okay, it's part of your response. I didn't get that. I hadn't read it thoroughly enough. So you're right. In that instance, it was part of your response. But if it hadn't been a continuation of your response, but instead a totally separate thing, then it would have been an assertion. And these things you ask at 1040, Alex, are called questions. Isn't the assertion something like a response? Well, no. I mean, the one asserting something has a burden to substantiate it. One responding only has to establish that they've not adequately substantiated it. You don't have to prove something's wrong to negate it. You just have to show that the app hasn't fulfilled its burden to affirm. We should always default to negating until an affirmation has actually made a case that you can allows you to meaningfully rebut it. In other words, they have to actually say things that substantiate their claim in order to necessitate a rebuttal at all. If an AF gets up and makes a case, we should plant trees in Central Park. Contention 1, I have a duck. Contention 2, what's that? Contention 3, hello. There's no need for the neg to say anything. The AF loses because they failed to meet their burden to affirm the contention they're claiming. None of their contention level arguments, meaning the claim they're making, none of their contention level arguments are relevant to the claim they're making, so they can't possibly substantiate it. So the neg doesn't need to say a goddamn word. We already know we should negate that, right? That's why responding and asserting are different. Because on the micro level, both sides of the resolution, the AF and the neg, both do some asserting and some responding, right? In totality, the neg's responding to the AF, but because there's point, answer, answer to, maybe answer to, answer to, obviously, if the neg chooses to make any offense, which is to say, off-case arguments that aren't responsive to the AF case, but are relevant to the topic area or resolution, that's called a critique. Those are assertions negating the AF's position, but not responding to it. They're called off-case arguments. Even disads, I think they're misclassified as offs, but they're classified as offs. I don't think disads, technically, yeah, they technically are off-case arguments, right? So a disad is like, I say, here's what my case is. We should plant trees in Central Park. Contention 1, they'll provide more shade. Contention 2, they will suck up carbon dioxide. Contention 3, a lot of trees were recently blown down and need to be replaced. If I argue that if we vote AF, this harm they haven't mentioned will occur, that's a disad. It's an assertion I'm making that's not responsive to anything specific they said, but is responsive to their general affirmation. So that's why even disads are off-case arguments. Pretty interesting if you ask me, but most people don't find that very interesting. If somebody's asking me questions about the difference between a response and an assertion, they're my hero. Alex T, you're asking excellent questions. Important questions that if you have the answer to them, clarify things immensely, right? If you understand the answer to them. It's easy to get confused about what the difference between an assertion and a response is because of the nature of how arguments go, right? This person isn't required to only respond to things this person said. They can respond to the implications of what they said as an assertion, right? So it's a fairly precise distinction making, but if you understand it in full, you can always make the distinction correctly every time. That's why debate has a finite and complete list of possible off-case arguments. Critiques, perms, counterplans, disads, etc. You know? And I already understood why debate couldn't be a powerful tool because almost nobody attends like this, and almost nobody is even remotely interested in learning how to attend like this. So, and almost nobody is capable of attending like this. So, I never really thought that debate could be any kind of panacea. I did think that it was a general force of good, and I still do, that as long as we continue to produce an environment that, on balance, rewards better arguments with victory and punishes worse arguments with loss, well, then at least the debaters, people who graduated from high school having done debate, if they're also disinterested, then they have the power to be correct, use language right, etc. But nevertheless, most of them don't. So I already knew that wasn't going to work. If the neg does that, does the app then have to address it and negate it, even though it was an assertion from the neg rather than a negation? Well, if they don't address it, respond to it, then it's considered dropped. Whether or not a dropped argument is determinant in who wins the round depends on whether the dropped argument is a voter, and if it's not a voter, then it depends on whether it's the impact that tips the scale in favor of that side in the impact calculus. So it's not, you don't lose automatically if you drop an argument. Even if you drop it, they still have to extend it and impact it. Otherwise, they don't get to win it just because you dropped it, right? So let's say in the first half rebuttal, I cover the neg's answer to my F, and I then respond to the neg's offense or off case arguments. But I drop one of the off case arguments. Well, if they don't catch that I dropped it and don't extend it in their next speech, then the drop doesn't matter. If they catch that I dropped it, extend it, which is to say, he dropped it, this was what the argument was again, and then ideally impacted in that speech and then impacted again in the last speech, then you can get away with dropping some shit, because there's only so much time you have to cover the flow, and most debaters aren't technically perfect. The best debaters are always close, which is what it means to be technically perfect is to have successfully flowed every argument in the round. You need that as a map for what needs to be responded to. So to have accurately and successfully flowed everything they said, but everything they said, I mean, the nutshell of the claim, the nutshell of the warrant, and the nutshell of the impact. Everything else is just fluff. Well, I mean, the best debaters don't drop anything. The best debaters are technically very close to perfect, always flow accurately, and almost never fail to address something. If they're running out of time, they'll bundle a response to cover two things. Say this response also applies to this for this slightly different warrant. That's a way to save time, You can't be accused of dropping it. It's called crosshat. You cross applying your response from meow to meow. So if you're running out of time, what debaters do is they go, okay, and also cross-apply answer to 4 to 5, cross-apply answer to 3 to 6, cross-apply answer to 2 to 7. Now, they technically didn't drop it, but they made very, very weak responses to it. And see, the thing is, I was never one of the best technical debaters. Like, when I actually debated, I was not even a good technical debater. Like, the thing, I was good at covering the flow. I wasn't good at flowing it. My partner flowed, and I used his flows. But once I became a coach, I learned how to flow because I had to judge so many rounds. I learned how to flow fast, you know. My flows, nobody else but me could possibly make any sense of them because I write things in random places and draw little arrows and lines and stuff that only I can interpret because I know what my little symbol means, but other people have no idea. And anybody who looks at my flows as a good debater goes, is that your flow? But I get to enjoy the pleasant surprise at the end of the round when they discover I flowed every fucking thing you said. I flowed everything both people said, and I have exactly the right judgment on this round, and I have exactly the right reasons for decision. It's like, don't judge a book by its flow cover, right? Yes, my flows look ridiculous, and it looks like this guy must have just gotten introduced to debate right now, even though he's obviously an old debate coach or whatever. I just never learned to float properly in high school because I didn't have a debate coach. I had to coach myself and my partner. We had a speech coach, you know. It was absolutely useless, of course. Speech coaches have no business even pretending to chime in with debaters. They just get the fuck out of here. You have no idea what we're doing. Maybe if I had a proper debate coach, he would force me to flow properly, and I wouldn't have my ridiculous flows that I have now, you know. But whatever, they work for me. And the point of a flow is purely a tool, right? If you can look at your flow and know what all the arguments were, and figure out what all the responses were, and what all the responses were, etc., then it's good enough. It doesn't need to look pretty. You're just gonna throw it away after the round anyway. I mean, debaters often don't. Debaters sometimes save all of their flows, and they've got this huge stack of these long papers with all these little tiny words written on them. Because they just, I don't know, they like to look at them or something. I just throw them away. Mine don't look pretty though, so. Debate coach was such a good job for me. It was a really fulfilling job. It wasn't my favorite job exactly. My favorite job was working at the deli because it was just fast paced action. Take your order, take your money, give you some change, give you your box of olives, get you your sandwich. It was nice. It was very sensory. Didn't require me to do any thinking. Yes. When should I flow? Continually, unless you're giving a speech. You just, if you're doing it right, you're always scrambling to catch up at the end of every speech. There's just too much shit said, you know? Even super fast blowers, faster than me, I'm pretty fast. They're still going to be scrambling at the end of the speech to catch up. And in fact, in most policy debate rounds, after a speech ends, the time ends, everybody just sits there silently while the judges finish flowing out the speech they just heard, which has also been USB drive to them so they can look at the text of it. Because in contemporary policy debate, if you've got two top level teams going and they're reading 350 words a minute, yes, it is possible to flow it without looking at their cases. I had to do that one time at Berkeley. I went into a round, and for some reason, the USB thing didn't come to me. I didn't have a copy of their cases. But I'm old school. It used to be that didn't exist, right? There was no disclosure. I hate disclosure. Why shouldn't it be the case that I can win because I've ideated better than you between tournaments and come up with some clever original idea? Why do I have to tip you off to it ahead of time? That's a fucking legitimate advantage I have, right? Disclosure is not usually a mandated rule. Some tournaments it is, but it's risky not to disclose because everybody who doesn't disclose always gets around a disclosure K against them. He should lose the round because he didn't disclose. That puts us at an inherent unfair competitive disadvantage because most people did disclose, etc. So almost nobody elects to choose the option to not disclose because they don't want to run into that K. Even though that's not the proper way to avoid that situation. The proper way to avoid that situation is to bait them into running that K, having the answer to it, and knowing it's a voter. That's the way to deal with it. Always turn, don't counter, if you can. You can't always turn, but every time you can turn, don't counter. Turning an argument says, what you're positioning as offense against me, I've now turned it into offense against you. If you just counter something, the best thing that can happen is their contention is not standing and they get none of the offense they were trying to accomplish, right? But if you can turn it somehow, impact turn, link turn, the critique's kind of like a turn. Well, then now you didn't just diffuse their bomb, you refused it and put it in their bathroom. So that's a much better way to go. The other thing, here's a little debate tip for everybody. Something I used to hammer with my students all the time. When you ask questions and you get an answer, say, thank you, ask the next question. Do not give them any more information. It's like, the kids do this all the time. They're in cross-X. They're asking the other person a question. The other person gives them an answer they don't like, and then they proceed to try to rebut that answer in cross-X. No. What you want to do is give them zero information about what you think of their answer or what you're going to do with it. Do you remember? No. Oh, okay, cool. Thanks. Do you now all of a sudden they're worried. Wait, why do you seem to like that answer? As I understand this case, he doesn't want that answer. And I don't know now. That's a good way to go. Then, after you're done with the cross section, you review what their answers were and um, and work the implications. I asked him if he said no. But that implies meow, which contradicts his here thing. He's double bound himself. That's reason enough to vote for us. That's the way to do it. And but see that knowing these sort of things sometimes gets me into a little bit of a bad habit when I'm on YouTube. Like people will, the same thing goes to the other direction. People will ask me a question and I'll give them the answer and no further information because I know they're going to use the answer wrong. And why would I want to give them a heads up that they're about to get corrected? Well, that I'm not doing debate here, though, right? If somebody asks a question, my job is to give them an answer they understand and that improves their knowledge, right? Not to refuse to do their work for them, which is, you know, it's like that's great in debate, but it's not their work, right? That's why they're asking me. So, I gotta be a little bit better at code switching. People would be better listeners if they did something like flow in important conversations. I mean, yeah, well, as a deliberative type, I like to, you understand listening to mean the same thing I understand it to mean. But lots of people don't understand that to mean listening. People think listening means paying attention to you. Paying attention to you is could potentially be called being a good listener, but it doesn't necessarily involve listening to what you're saying at all. Like when Corey and I were arguing, he was paying attention to me the whole time, but he was doing things like reading my body language and my emotions, not listening to the words I said. And it's probably unreasonable of me to expect him to listen the way I think he should listen, right? I mean, I think he'll listen a lot better when he's convalesced a bit, you know? That's the word I was looking for, convalesced. He needs to heal a bit. He's not accustomed to an environment in which he can trust other people's words. He's been conditioned to understand that his intuition about their actual motivations is always more reliable than their words. That's true if you're talking about a BPD person, but it's definitely not true if you're talking about me. If someone asks you a question on here and you get the sense they are going to use the answer in a way you know you don't want them to, then why answer? Well, because in debate, that's a good thing. I give them the answer. As usual, I've intuited what they're going to do with it, and I'm right. and then I already know what happens next, right? That's great in debate, but I need to be better about code switching according to the discursive environment, you know? I was fine about that in school as a teacher because, like, kids will give people pushback sometimes, but unlike adults, they don't give a teacher pushback because they intuit the teacher is especially good and knows what they're talking about. Adults give pushback in that situation because adults have so many ego issues attached, and for some reason, intelligence is so important to people as as a metaphor because people don't have an IQ. It's ridiculous. But because most people prefer to think in terms of shorthand approximations like metaphors and stuff, it's quicker. Well, yeah. A cylinder about 10 feet wide and washed up on a Western Australia beach. Police are urging people to stay away from the hazardous object. Yeah, that's an assertion. Where it is again. Mrs. Mom says, without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed and no Republican survive. John F. Kennedy. Kennedy. Is that an assertion? Yes. Is it a well constructed assertion? No, because it makes too broad of a claim. It's easily enough falsifiable. All you have to do is find one example of a country that still survives despite repressing debate, and you falsify the statement. So, like, well, North Korea disallows debate, and they still survive. So that's why you shouldn't construct assertions like that. You need to be cautious in your construction. It's great to use all and no if you can substantiate it, because it's a lot stronger than some. There's really not any point in making a contingent with some. So I guess people go, why I should use all or no, right? Well, you don't have to use any quantifier if you can find a way to avoid it. And if you're going to use a quantifier, it is better to use, you should definitely use all or no, but only use that if you can back it up. If you can back up that totalization and get that totalization to stand, well, that's potentially very powerful in what I call flow pacting, which is basically final speech impacting of the impact. So here are the key points, remember, Judge. This one's a voter, and I won it, so I'm going to win the round. They won this point, but it's not a voter, so it doesn't matter. Like that. That's what I call flow pacting. This is a term I made up to distinguish between regular impacting of things and final impacting of things, which has to be more frame level impacting, you know? I love it when people ask me questions about debate and stuff because they're just saying, always be a learner, never be an expert. Well, the reality is, if you're learning right, then it creates a succession of expertises as you complete those learning endeavors. If you never become an expert, you're either learning about something that doesn't have right answers, just preferable and less preferable solutions, or you're not learning right. So it is good to be an expert if you actually are an expert. I'm an expert at debate. I'm an expert at cognitive functions. I much prefer talking about debate because nobody seems to object to the fact that I'm an expert at that. It doesn't seem to cause people to immediately negate what I'm saying because I'm positioning myself as an expert on that. I think the reason is actually mostly this. Understanding debate I'm not ahead of the curve with that. So when I'm talking about debate, even though most lay people don't know anything about it, they can understand better what I'm saying, even though it's just as complex, jargony, chef talky or whatever. Because even if they aren't directly understanding debate prior to now, the world has it in it enough that they're capable of understanding it because they're not so far away from the terms and with cognitive functions, because the correct explanation isn't present in the world, except in stark minority to this massive pile of wrong explanations. People are less equipped than normal to accurately parse out what I'm saying to see if it has merit on its own, right? So that's why I like talking about debate, because I'm an expert on it. I think it's very interesting. And I like explaining things. And when I explain debate stuff, people don't seem to hate me. There was a time when I was slightly ahead of the curve in debate, when I was a very active coach. There was a stretch time when I was a few steps ahead of basically all the rest of the baseball coaches I encountered. Just two, maybe steps ahead, maybe three. But it's impossible to get far ahead of the curve in debate, and it's impossible to stay ahead of the curve in debate, except insofar as that's your life's purpose, is to win debate tournaments. You can stay ahead of the curve for as long as you can sustain that level of intensity. As soon as you slack off a little bit, someone else will pass you. And that's beautiful, That means when I was ahead of the curve, it really meant something. It's like I was ahead of the curve because I genuinely was superior to those people. Right now, I'm ahead of the curve because of happenstance luck. I landed on this pile of Jungian truth with the right tool set at the right time when nobody else had happened to land on it for very understandable reasons. Smart people wouldn't go near it. A general assessment of the data would immediately reveal any smart person, everybody's saying something different. This is astrology. I didn't say that. because I was a little too intuitive and a little too little logical. So I went ahead and made the intuitive leap that there's something important here. Eventually, after many years of fiddling with it, I concluded I was right. You know, well. I smoked another cigarette and cursed Sir Walter Raleigh. He was such a stupid get. I'm so tired. My mind is set on you. Although I'm so tired, I don't know what to do. I wonder if I call you, will I know what you would do? You'd say, you're doing me wrong. You said it's no joke. It's doing me harm. You know I can't think. I can't think of blank. I can't sleep. And saying, I'll give you everything I got for a little peace of mind. How little? Say a third of your mind? That's not a little piece of my mind. Okay. How about an eighth of your mind? An eighth ball of mind, huh? Have a razor blade? I like to snort lines of dried, powdered, chopped up human brain. I got so into it for a while, my septum collapsed. Don't collapse your septum. That isn't wise. Alright, I'm gonna have to revisit here the topic of Johnny. What a mind blowing 5 or 6 days. And as significant a part of that mind blow as any other was discovering Johnny. I mean, I had discovered him already, but realizing that unlike every other artist I've ever encountered, the fact that this first song I found of his that was kind of blown up a little bit was great was indication that he was a good artist. He'd gotten one good song. One great song good enough to make my playlist. That's very rare. Great job. I heard a second song of his, and I also put that on my playlist. I was like, wow, he's fucking killing. He's got 2 great songs. 2 songs good enough to make my playlist. What a remarkable find. And I didn't bother clicking on other shit because I already know from myriad examples of that whatever band it is, I go through like their first couple most popular songs. Most of those will be great. The less popular ones will turn out to be not good. I click on this Johnny song, I click on that Johnny song. Every single one. I find myself putting on my playlist. I'm like, what is going on here? Who is this guy? I keep checking out more of his songs. I just get every single one is at worst interestingly good. And only a couple of them are that bad. on average, fantastic. And in several instances, timeless genius. And his newest album, there's not a single mistake on it until the last song. And the mistake is he, for whatever reason, decides to make it 7 minutes long. That was a bad idea. It wasn't a bad song. It should have just ended at 2:45 or something. That's the only mistake he made on that whole album. And I listened to it again today thoroughly. I listened to the whole thing and listened to it. And after I had really made sure I was willing to make this ridiculous statement, I said to Rachel, I cannot believe I am saying this, but I can't be 100% sure until I listen to it a lot more, but I am very close to 100% sure this is the most mistake-free album since Rubber Soul. Because nobody makes mistake-free albums. There's only been one in history, Rubber Soul. Everybody is hit and miss. The greatest artists in history, in terms of hit and miss ratio, are the Beatles. And even they only have one perfect album. And the rest of their albums have more mistakes on them than the newest Johnny album. I mean, it changed my whole paradigm. It was partially helpful in me realizing, you know what? So statistically unlikely that it's almost impossible is not the same thing as impossible. Here I have an example of a guy pulling off something that I was absolutely sure nobody would ever pull off. Since, again, except for the Beatles on Rubber Soul. And he didn't pull that off. He had a mistake on that album, okay? So it's not Rubber Soul. It's still only one perfect album in history. But I never thought I would dare compare someone to the Beatles. If you told me this person compared to the Beatles, I'd say, oh, well then we can entirely dismiss their taste in music as wrong. Because that person obviously should not be spoken of in the same breath as the Beatles. Today, I compared a new artist who put out his newest album 4 months ago to the Beatles. And I stand by my comparison. If you know anything about me, you should know this. I am the snobbiest music snob in history. I have impossibly high taste to meet. I require music to be in the top 0.000000001% of music in the entire history of the world for it to be worthy of my listening to it. It is statistically impossible that one guy on one album can have me include on my playlist every single song except the last one. And yet it happened. Like, Mother, I respect that band a great deal. Like, I thought, like, wow, this is the most impressive band I've heard in a long time. But I never was deluded into thinking they had anything close to a perfect album. They had multiple skips on the album. Like, the very best bands do have several, at least 4 or 5 probably, skips on an album. That's why I never listen to albums. I only listen to the cherry-picked greatest pieces of art in the world. I'm not a fan of artists. I'm a fan of good tracks. This guy, I left a comment asking if I could interview him. I've never wanted to interview anyone before. Well, I mean, the exception being Michael Reel. But I didn't want to interview him until he said he'd like me to interview him. Then I was like extremely excited to interview him. Don't get me wrong about that. But I didn't know before he approached me that I wanted to interview him, right? Because nobody's that stand out better enough to be that interesting for me to want to interview him. Today, I wrote a long comment. I have never written anything like it ever before. Just expressing how my mind was so blown, how we were coming to this guy's concert in September 22nd in San Luis Obispo, and if there was any possible way I could interview him briefly, before, after the concert, or any day, remotely, anytime, it would practically make my life. I wrote this comment. Eric did. If you are not convinced by now that something amazing is happening on Johnny's YouTube channel, you should replay what I've just said, think about who I am and how I am about shit, and realize something truly amazing is going on at Johnny's YouTube channel. Now, you might say, well, Eric, you're picky, but you don't like good music. You have the wrong taste in music. Well, then you've got intuition either countervalued in a bad spot, blind, or something, because you're completely wrong about everything musically, you know. That's fine. You are entitled to be as wrong as you want. I cannot prove that I'm right. But if you yourself have a tendency towards rightness about music, then you already know Eric's got the best taste in music. His playlist is the bomb, right? Like the absolute bomb. It's Rachel in my playlist. Rachel is the absolute bomb, because Rachel and I are the only 2 people besides Corey I ever met who are always right about music. We are never say like, oh, I love this song and it's a bad song. Neither of us ever says that, or I even like this song. Our correctness about music is like Dave and Shan, okay? We always somehow agree. Except with Rachel and me, it's the truth. It's not Dave and Shan bullshitting, right? Now, again, I want to stress this. Granted, it is not the case that I can prove or establish such that you should believe it withstood scrutiny, any of these statements, because aesthetics doesn't work like that. It's not deconstructible. I know I'm right, but you guys may know just as strongly that your taste in music is better, and I have no way of falsifying that. So if you want to just say, look, you're making claims you can't substantiate, I just have to say true, and therefore they're not standing. You win that point. But if instead of wanting to do that, you want to experience your mind being blown, stop watching this live stream right now and go to Johnny's YouTube channel and listen to that man's music. And like, what could possibly be more satisfying than genius music? There is nothing in the world that's ultimately more satisfying than listening to something genius and having it blow your mind. Because music is the most important art form, you know? The coolest guy in the world is always the same person as the guy in the world who's most correct about music right now. If there isn't anybody who meets that criterion, then some other top level person in some other field can get that title. And for most of human history, or modern rock history, or whatever, there's never been a singular coolest guy in the world. For the Beatles, they were all the coolest guy in the world for their thing. They attained that, right? Then Falco did it when he released their Commissar with that incredible video. At that moment, he was the coolest guy in the world and knew it. And was correct, right? It only lasted one song for him, and it was still a remarkable achievement. So, my basic point here is Johnny is logically, necessarily, therefore, the coolest guy in the world right now. And he will be for a lot longer than Falco was. Because that kind of genius, you just have to just rejoice in its glory. The only appropriate response. Anyhow, so now that everybody fully understands, I have a new evangelism. Besides cognitive functions, debate, evolution, fast food, all the various other topics I've got evangelisms on. I haven't gotten a new evangelism in a long time. But I do have one now. And my sermon is, go listen to Johnny. If your mind's not blown, stop listening to music entirely. So, if you follow that instruction, good for you. If not, that's fine too. I love you anyway, and I think I'm going to stop streaming now. I don't really feel like I'm ready to go to bed, but I do have a special friend. First name is Haffa. Second name is Clownpin. And I think the fact that if I combine that with the fact that I got zero sleep last night and way too little sleep for the last like 4 or 5 days, then despite this highly charged state of slab avalanche, you know, because it was a slab avalanche, and obviously that gets your adrenaline flowing, and you're just like, what the fuck's going on? When did the world get all magical and everything, you know? So that kind of keeps me up, in addition to the fact that I took 2 Adderalls. I took them way this morning, you know. So, and that was after not sleeping at all. So, my wakefulness right now can't really be best attributed to just the fact that I took 2 Adderalls this morning. It's probably better attributed to a combination of that and my highly charged state of spiritual excitement. Don't get too spiritually excited. It causes insomnia. All right, good night, good luck, and I love you.